The stars belonged to the old ones. At least that was what they said. For 50,000 years, the galactic concordat had ruled everything they could see. 12 ancient species sat on the High Council. They made the rules. They divided the planets between themselves. They took what they wanted. No one could stop them. Their ships were powerful. Their weapons could destroy worlds. They had technology that seemed like magic. Every species in the galaxy either served them or feared them. The Concordat kept peace, but it was their kind of peace. If someone refused to obey, the Concordat sent warships. Those who fought back always lost. One day a Concordat scout ship found something new. A small yellow star near the edge of known space. 8 planets circled it. The 3rd planet had life. The scouts sent their report back to the council. They had found another species. These beings called themselves humans. They called their world Earth. The humans were young. They had just learned to travel between their planets. They had small stations orbiting their moon and Mars. Their ships were slow and simple. To the Concordat, humans looked like children playing with toys. The council looked at the reports and made their decision quickly. The Virex Empire wanted the Sol system. The Vrex were one of the strongest members of the Concordat. They had conquered hundreds of worlds before. Their commander, Admiral Kranoth, looked at the human system and saw riches. The outer planets had metals and gases that the Vrex needed. Earth itself did not matter much to them. The council agreed with the Vrex claim. Under Concordat law, humans had no rights. They were too primitive. They did not control enough space. They could not defend themselves. The law was clear. The Vrex could take the system. The humans could be moved somewhere else if the Vrex chose to allow it. Earth tried to talk with the Concordat. Human leaders sent messages. They offered friendship and trade. They asked for time to prove themselves. They wanted to show they could be good neighbors in the galaxy. The Concordat did not care. To them, humans were like insects asking to keep their nest. The council allowed one human delegation to speak. 5 humans traveled to the Concordat capital world. They stood before the 12 ancient species. The chamber was huge and cold. The council members looked down at the humans from high seats. Some council members did not even watch. They were bored. The lead human diplomat was named Sarah Chen. She spoke with passion about Earth and its people. She talked about human history, human dreams, and human rights. She asked the council to see humans as equals. She begged them to leave the Sol system alone. She promised humans would cause no trouble. Admiral Kranoth laughed at her. His voice was harsh and cruel. He told the humans they were nothing. He said the Vrex had destroyed species stronger than humans without trying. He called Earth a worthless rock with worthless people on it. The other council members said nothing. Some looked away. Others smiled. The council gave their final word. Humans had 10 standard cycles to leave the Sol system. That was about 3 Earth years. They could take their people and go somewhere else. They could find an empty world far away. If they refused to leave, the Vrex would remove them by force. The decision was final. There would be no more discussion. Sarah Chen stood very still. Her face showed no emotion. She looked at each council member carefully. Then she spoke one last time. Her voice was quiet but clear. She said humans would remember this day. She said the Concordat would regret their choice. Then she turned and walked out. The council members laughed again. The Vrex began to gather their fleet. Admiral Kranoth was confident. He brought 3,000 warships to the edge of the Sol system. His ships were massive and deadly. Each one could destroy a city with one shot. His crews were experienced warriors. They had never lost a battle. Kranoth expected this to be easy work. The Vrex ships waited at the border. They watched Earth and the other human worlds. They expected to see panic. They thought humans would beg for mercy or try to run away. Instead, something strange happened. Earth went silent. All human communications stopped. Their space stations went dark. Their cities seemed empty from space. What the Vrex did not know was that humans had started a secret project. It was called Operation Exodus. The Concordat thought it was an evacuation plan. They were wrong. Humans were not running away. They were preparing for war. Every nation on Earth had united. Every factory had changed what it made. Every scientist worked on the same goal. Every human had one purpose now: survival. The clock was ticking. 3 years to prepare. 3 years to build what they needed. 3 years to do the impossible. The Concordat had made their biggest mistake. They had given humans time, and humans were very good at using time wisely when their home was threatened. 2 years passed slowly. The Vrex fleet stayed at the edge of the Sol system and watched. They expected humans to break. They thought the humans would send more messages begging for mercy. They imagined human ships trying to escape with refugees, but none of that happened. Instead, Earth remained completely quiet. Admiral Krenoth found the silence strange. He sent scout ships closer to investigate. The scouts returned with odd reports. Earth's orbital stations were empty but still had power. The cities below showed no lights at night. Mars colonies appeared abandoned. The space traffic between planets had stopped completely. It was as if all humans had simply vanished. Krenoth called a meeting with his commanders. They discussed what the silence meant. Some thought humans had killed themselves rather than leave. Others believed they had fled to deep space in secret ships. A few suggested humans were hiding on their planet's surface. But none of these answers felt right. Something else was happening. The Vrex had good sensors and spy satellites. They could see through clouds and detect heat signatures. For 18 months, those sensors had shown something interesting. Massive industrial activity across the entire Sol system. Factories on Earth ran day and night. Mining operations covered the Moon and Mars. Construction sites filled the asteroid belt. Then suddenly, everything went dark. Concordat intelligence officers studied the data carefully. They were professional spies who had watched thousands of worlds. What they saw in the human system confused them. The level of industry was impossible for such a young species. The coordination was perfect. Every human nation had worked together without fighting. That never happened with primitive species. The intelligence report reached the High Council. Some council members read it with interest. Others ignored it completely. The Archons, the oldest species in the Concordat, paid close attention. Their representative was named Elder Voth. He had lived for 3,000 years and seen many species rise and fall. Something about the humans worried him. Elder Voth spoke privately with other council members. He suggested they offer humans better terms. He thought forcing humans from their home might be a mistake. But the other council members refused to listen. They said showing weakness would encourage other young species to challenge the Concordat. The decision was already made. The Vrex would proceed as planned. 1 year remained before the deadline. Admiral Krenoth grew impatient. He wanted to start the invasion immediately. He told the council that humans were clearly defeated already. He said his fleet would sweep through the system quickly and claim it for the Vrex. The council gave him permission to prepare his final assault. Victory seemed certain. Krenoth assembled his invasion fleet properly. 3,000 warships formed up in perfect formations. Each ship was a masterpiece of Vrex engineering. They had shields that could stop nuclear weapons. They had energy beams that could cut through mountains. They had centuries of combat experience backing every decision. The fleet was unstoppable, or so they believed. The other Concordat species watched with interest. Many sent observers to witness the invasion. Some placed bets on how long humans would last. Most guessed less than a day. A few generous souls gave humans a whole week. No one expected real resistance. Humans were primitives. Primitives always lost. That was how the galaxy worked. Deep in the Kuiper Belt, far beyond Neptune, something enormous waited in the cold darkness. Thousands of objects floated in the ice and rock. They looked like asteroids to the Vrex sensors. They had the same size and mass and temperature, but they were not asteroids. They were something the Concordat had never seen before. They were human warships waiting silently. The ships had been built in secret over 3 years. Every human had contributed to their construction. Children had assembled small components. Adults had worked in factories and shipyards. Scientists had designed new weapons. Engineers had built them. Soldiers had trained in secret. The entire human species had become one giant war machine with a single purpose. Humans had studied every recording of Concordat ships and weapons. They had analyzed every battle the Vrex had ever fought. They had learned the strengths and weaknesses of their enemies. They had designed their ships to counter Vrex advantages. The human ships were not elegant or beautiful. They were tools built for one job: killing Vrex ships. 2 days before the deadline, a single message transmitted across all Concordat channels. It was short and simple. It was in every known language. The message said only this: warning declared. Leave the Sol system. This is your only notice. Then the transmission ended. No explanation. No negotiation. Just a warning. Admiral Krenoth received the message on his flagship bridge. He read it and laughed out loud. His officers laughed with him. The idea that humans could threaten the Vrex was hilarious. Krenoth ordered the message broadcast to the entire Concordat. He wanted everyone to see how foolish humans were. He wanted everyone to laugh at them. The message spread across 1,000 worlds. Everyone did laugh. But they would not laugh for long. The deadline arrived. Krenoth gave the order to advance. 3,000 Vrex warships moved forward into the Sol system. They expected to find empty space or a few desperate human fighters. Instead, they were about to discover that humans had spent 3 years preparing a welcome. A very deadly welcome. The Vrex fleet moved through empty space with perfect confidence. Admiral Krenoth sat in his command chair and watched the displays. His ship spread out in standard attack formation. They had used this formation 1,000 times before. It always worked. The sensors showed nothing ahead. The Sol system appeared completely defenseless. This would be the easiest conquest in Vrex history. Then everything changed. The sensor officer shouted an alarm. The displays suddenly filled with contacts. Hundreds of contacts, then thousands, then tens of thousands. The numbers kept climbing. The sensor system struggled to count them all. Every screen showed red warnings. Impossible numbers of ships appeared from nowhere. The human fleet emerged from hiding. Ships that had looked like asteroids powered up their engines. The cold darkness suddenly blazed with light as 47,000 warships came to life. They had been waiting silently in the Kuiper Belt. Now they moved forward as one massive wall of metal and fire, the largest fleet ever assembled by any species in 3 years. Across the Concordat, observers watched in total shock. The screens showed numbers that should not exist. Building one warship took years, even for advanced species. Building a fleet this size should take centuries. But humans had done it in just 3 years. The mathematics did not work. It was impossible. Yet there the fleet was, real and deadly. Human ship designs were crude compared to Vrex elegance. They had no beautiful curves or artistic details. They were boxes and cylinders covered in weapons. They looked like industrial machines, not warships. But they were functional. Every part served a purpose. No wasted space, no decoration. Just brutal efficiency designed for one thing: killing enemies. The human weapons were equally simple. No elegant energy beams or sophisticated torpedoes. Just kinetic cannons that threw metal at incredible speeds. Nuclear missiles by the thousands. Chemical lasers pumped by atomic explosions. Weapons that any species could build if they worked hard enough. Nothing fancy. Nothing clever. Just overwhelming firepower. A communication channel opened. A human voice spoke clearly across the void. It was Admiral Chen Wei, commander of Earth's defense fleet. Her voice was calm and cold. She said the Vrex had come to take humanity's home. She said they would now learn why that was the biggest mistake they would ever make. Then she gave a single order. Fire. The Battle of the Belt began. 47,000 human ships opened fire at once, space filled with missiles and metal projectiles. The sheer volume of fire was overwhelming. Vrex shields flashed and sparked as they tried to stop the incoming rounds. Some shields held. Many did not. Explosions bloomed across the Vrex formation like deadly flowers. Admiral Krenoth screamed orders at his commanders. He told them to hold formation and return fire. The Vrex ships had better weapons and stronger shields. They had superior technology in every way. Each Vrex ship was worth 10 human ships in a fair fight. But this was not a fair fight. This was 47,000 ships against 3,000. The numbers were crushing. Human tactics were nothing like Concordat battle doctrine. They did not fight with honor or follow accepted rules. They swarmed their targets like angry insects. 10 human ships would focus on one Vrex ship and hammer it with everything they had. When shields fell, nuclear missiles finished the job. The humans fought with calculated savagery. Some human ships made kamikaze runs. They accelerated to maximum speed and rammed Vrex vessels. The ships were filled with nuclear weapons. The explosions destroyed both ships but damaged others nearby. The Concordat observers were horrified. No civilized species fought this way. Suicide attacks were barbaric. But humans did not care about civilized warfare. They cared about winning. Other human ships closed in for boarding actions. Teams of armored marines used breaching charges to cut into Vrex hulls. They fought room by room inside enemy ships. The Vrex had never experienced this before. Space battles were supposed to happen at long range with energy weapons. The humans brought the fight up close and personal. It was terrifying. The Concordat strategic analysts suddenly understood something important. The human disadvantage in technology was actually an advantage. Wreck ships took 20 years to build. They were expensive and complex. Losing one was a major loss. Human ships were cheap and simple. They could build 100 in the time the wrecks built one. Quantity had its own quality. Human commanders showed creativity that baffled the Concordat strategists. They did not follow standard combat doctrines because they had never learned them. They invented their own tactics. They tried things that military textbooks said would not work. Sometimes they failed, but often they succeeded in ways no one expected. They were unpredictable and dangerous because of it. After 2 hours of combat, the Vrex fleet was in chaos. Ships burned and exploded throughout the formation. Communications were disrupted. Commanders shouted conflicting orders. The perfect discipline was breaking down. Krenoth watched his fleet dying around him. He had lost 500 ships already. The humans were still coming. There seemed to be no end to them. Admiral Krenoth made a decision. He ordered a retreat. His ships would pull back to regroup and reassess. But the humans did not give him time. They pursued aggressively, destroying ships that tried to run. The Vrex had come to the Sol system expecting an easy victory. Instead, they found themselves fighting for survival against a species that refused to die. The Vrex retreat turned into a disaster. Human ships chased them relentlessly. Every time a Vrex ship fell behind, human fighters swarmed it. The kill rate was terrible. For every human ship destroyed, 3 Vrex ships died. The numbers were wrong. The Vrex had better technology. They should be winning. But they were not. Admiral Krenoth watched his fleet fall apart. His officers shouted damage reports constantly. Hull breaches on dozens of ships. Shield generators failing. Weapons offline. Casualties mounting. The communications channels filled with desperate voices calling for help. Help that could not come. There were too many damaged ships and not enough time. The Concordat observers finally understood what made humans so dangerous. Human ships were cheap to build. A Vrex dreadnought took 20 years and massive resources. In that same time, humans had built 100 cruisers. The math was simple but devastating. The Vrex could not replace their losses fast enough. Humans could drown them in numbers. Another advantage became clear. Human ships had small crews. Most functions were automated by artificial intelligence. A human cruiser needed only 50 people. A Vrex ship of the same size needed 500. Humans could build more ships because they needed fewer trained crew members. They had solved the personnel problem with computers. The Concordat feared artificial intelligence. They had strict laws limiting computer thinking. Ancient wars had taught them to be careful. But humans had no such history. They embraced AI fully. Their computers helped design ships, control weapons, and make tactical decisions. It gave them an edge that Concordat species deliberately avoided. Human creativity in battle continued to shock the observers. They used tactics that military academies would call wrong or foolish. They split their formations in ways that should not work. They attacked from angles that left them exposed. But these tactics succeeded because the Vrex did not expect them. Unpredictability was its own weapon. One human tactic particularly disturbed the Concordat. When human ships were damaged beyond repair, their crews evacuated. Then the ships accelerated toward Vrex positions and exploded. The humans turned their dying vessels into massive bombs. No other species did this. It showed a level of ruthlessness that made everyone uncomfortable. Back on Earth, recordings showed how humans had achieved the impossible. Every nation had united completely. Old enemies became partners. Countries that had fought for centuries worked together without argument. Political differences were put aside. Religious conflicts were forgotten. Everyone had one goal: survival. Nothing else mattered. The human economy had transformed totally. Every factory stopped making normal goods. They made ship parts instead. Every mine dug materials for the fleet. Every power plant fed the shipyards. Millions of people lived on rations so resources could go to the military. Children studied engineering and warfare. Adults worked 16-hour days without complaint. The level of sacrifice was stunning. Humans had given up everything comfortable about their lives. No new cars or houses were built. No entertainment industries operated. No luxury goods existed. Every resource went to the fleet. An entire civilization had turned itself into a weapon. They had done what the Concordat thought impossible. They had truly unified as one species. The High Council convened an emergency session. They watched the battle unfold on massive screens. Some council members wanted to send help to the Vrex. Others argued for staying neutral. A few suggested offering humans peace terms. The debate grew heated. No one had expected this outcome. The Concordat itself might be at risk if humans won. Elder Voth of the Archon stood and spoke. His voice was old but strong. He said something that silenced the entire chamber. He said humans fought like they had nothing to lose, because from their perspective, they truly had nothing to lose. Their home was threatened. Their species faced extinction. When you threaten someone's existence, they become capable of anything. The Vrex fleet was down to 800 combat-capable ships. 2,200 had been destroyed or disabled. The battle had lasted 6 hours. Krenoth knew he was beaten. He prepared to signal surrender. But before he could, his sensor officer reported something new. More human ships were arriving. Another 10,000 fresh vessels emerged from Mars orbit. Krenoth understood then. The first wave of 47,000 ships was not the entire human fleet. It was just the first wave. Humans had built even more ships than anyone knew. They had reserves. They had reinforcements. The Vrex were not just losing. They were facing complete annihilation. Every ship, every crew, all of them would die here. Admiral Chen Wei opened communications again. Her face appeared on Krenoth's screen. She looked tired but determined. She offered him one chance. Surrender now and his crews would live. Continue fighting and every Virex ship would be destroyed. She gave him 5 minutes to decide. She said she hoped he would choose wisely. But her eyes said she did not care which he chose. Krenoth looked around his bridge. His officers stared at him with exhausted, frightened faces. Young Vrex who had joined the military expecting glory and easy victories. Instead, they had found humans who refused to die. He thought about his duty and his pride. Then he thought about keeping his people alive. The decision was harder than he expected. Admiral Krenoth reached for the surrender button. His hand shook. 40 years of military service, hundreds of victories. Now he would be remembered as the admiral who surrendered to primitives. His pride burned like acid in his throat, but his crews deserved to live. He pressed the button. Then everything changed. A young weapons officer shouted and pointed at his screen. Krenoth looked and saw what the officer had found. Deep in the Vrex fleet, 3 ships were preparing special weapons. Planet cracker missiles. Forbidden weapons that could destroy entire worlds. Someone had armed them without authorization. Someone was going to fire at Earth. Krenoth screamed orders to stop them, but it was too late. The missiles launched. 3 massive weapons accelerated toward Earth. They would reach the planet in 20 minutes. When they detonated, Earth's crust would crack. The oceans would boil. Every human on their homeworld would die. Billions of people, all dead because someone decided to murder them out of spite. Human intelligence detected the launch immediately. Alarms rang across every human ship. Admiral Chen Wei watched the missile tracks on her display. She had 20 minutes to stop 3 missiles. If even one got through, humanity was finished. Everything they had fought for would end. She gave orders without hesitation. All ships close enough intercept at any cost. 2,000 human ships broke formation. They burned their engines at maximum power toward the missiles. The ships pushed their reactors beyond safe limits. Some engines exploded from the strain. The crews did not care. They had one mission: stop those missiles. Nothing else mattered. Not their lives. Not their ships. Just stopping those missiles. The planet cracker missiles had shields and point defense systems. They were designed to be unstoppable. But humans had numbers on their side. Ships surrounded the first missile and hammered it with every weapon. The missile's shields held for 30 seconds. Then they collapsed. Nuclear missiles finished it. The first planet cracker exploded harmlessly in space. 1 down, 2 to go. The second missile was farther ahead. Only 500 human ships could reach it in time. They attacked in waves. The first wave died, breaking its shields. The second wave took out its engines. The third wave destroyed it completely. 300 ships and 1,500 crew members died stopping that missile. But they succeeded, 2 down, 1 to go. The third missile was almost to Earth. Only 50 human ships could intercept. They formed up and flew straight at it. They did not fire weapons. They did not have time. They simply rammed the missile at full speed. 50 ships with 5,000 people aboard. They gave their lives in seconds. But they stopped the missile. Earth was safe. Admiral Chen Wei watched the sacrifices on her screen. Her face remained calm, but tears ran down her cheeks. She wiped them away and opened a channel to her fleet. Her voice was ice-cold when she spoke. No mercy, no prisoners. Every Vrex ship dies. Every single one. They tried to murder our world. They tried to kill billions. Now they pay the price. The human fleet fell on the remaining Vrex ships like wolves on wounded prey. All pretense of military discipline vanished. This was revenge now, pure and simple. Human crews fought with rage in their hearts. They thought about the 5,000 people who died stopping the missiles. They thought about how close Earth came to destruction. They made the Vrex pay for every second of that fear. The Concordat observers watched in horror as the Vrex fleet was systematically annihilated. Human ships hunted down every vessel. Damaged ships that tried to surrender were ignored. Escape pods were targeted. Nothing was spared. In 3 hours, 800 Vrex ships became zero. 30,000 Vrex died in the darkness of space. The observers had never seen such complete destruction. Only one Vrex ship remained. Krenoth's flagship. It was surrounded by 200 human ships. All weapons were pointed at it. Chen Wei contacted Krenoth directly. She told him he would stand trial for war crimes. She said attempting to destroy a populated world was the worst crime possible. She said he would face human justice. Then she ordered Marines to board his ship. Human Marines cut through the flagship's hull with plasma torches. They swept through the ship room by room. The Vrex crew did not resist. They were too shocked and broken. The Marines found Krenoth on his bridge, sitting in his command chair. He did not fight. He looked at the humans with empty eyes and allowed them to take him prisoner. Admiral Chen Wei broadcast to the entire Concordat. Her message was clear and sharp. Admiral Krenoth would stand trial on Earth. He would be judged for attempting genocide. The trial would be public. Everyone in the galaxy could watch. Humans would show the Concordat what justice looked like. Real justice. Not the corrupt system that let strong species abuse weak ones. The message had deeper meaning. Humans were not asking permission. They were not requesting approval. They were simply stating what would happen. Humanity was enforcing their own laws now. They had won the right to do so through blood and sacrifice. The Concordat could accept it or they could try to stop it. But humans would not be ignored anymore. Across Concordat space, military planners ran new calculations. How many ships would it take to defeat humanity? The numbers were frightening. Humans had proven they could build massive fleets quickly. They had proven they would fight to the death. They had proven they were creative and ruthless. Several Concordat species began quietly mobilizing their own fleets, not to fight humans, to defend themselves in case humans decided to expand. Fear had entered the galaxy. Fear of the species everyone had dismissed as primitives. 3 months passed after the battle. Earth rebuilt and mourned. Memorials were raised for the dead. Names were carved in stone. 8,000 human lives lost defending their home. The number seemed small compared to the Vrex losses. But humans remembered every single person. They honored their sacrifice. They promised to make their deaths mean something. Admiral Krenoth stood in a courtroom on Earth. The room was simple and plain. No grand architecture. No impressive decorations. Just a room where justice would be done. Cameras broadcast the trial across the entire galaxy. Billions watched. The Concordat had never seen anything like this. A primitive species putting a Concordat admiral on trial. It was unthinkable. But it was happening. Human prosecutors presented evidence carefully. They showed records of Vrex attacks on other species, worlds conquered, populations enslaved, cultures destroyed. The Vrex Empire had a long history of brutality. Krenoth had participated in dozens of campaigns. He had followed orders that killed millions. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. But the trial was not just about Krenoth. It was about the entire Concordat system. Human lawyers argued that the Concordat itself was guilty. They showed how Concordat law allowed strong species to abuse weak ones. They proved the Council turned blind eyes to atrocities. They demonstrated that the whole system was corrupt from its foundation. Krenoth was allowed to defend himself. He spoke about duty and following orders. He said he was a soldier doing his job. He claimed the Concordat system had worked for 50,000 years. He argued that primitive species needed guidance from advanced ones. His defense was everything wrong with the Concordat in one speech. The judges listened carefully and took notes. The verdict came after 2 weeks. Guilty on all charges. Kreneth was sentenced to life imprisonment. He would spend the rest of his life thinking about his crimes. Some wanted execution, but humans chose imprisonment instead. They wanted to show they were better than the Concordat. They wanted to prove justice did not require vengeance, just accountability. The Concordat High Council met in emergency session again. They demanded humans dismantle their fleet. They said humanity had violated multiple treaties and laws. They threatened economic sanctions and military action. They expected humans to back down. Now that the immediate threat was gone, they were wrong. Humans had no intention of backing down ever again. Admiral Chen Wei addressed the council directly through a live transmission. She stood on the bridge of her flagship. Behind her, thousands of human warships floated in formation. She spoke clearly and firmly. Humans would not dismantle their fleet. They would not submit to Concordat oversight. They had tried peace once. The Concordat had responded with threats of genocide. Chen continued speaking. She said humans did not build their fleet to conquer. They built it to survive. But now they understood the truth. The Concordat would have let them die because they were not part of the old order. That would never happen again. Humans would protect themselves, and they would protect any other species the Concordat tried to abuse. Then Chen presented humanity's proposal. The Concordat must reform. New laws protecting developing species, limits on aggressive expansion, real punishments for war crimes, an end to the system that let the strong devour the weak. Humanity would not accept anything less. They had the fleet to enforce their demands. The Concordat could reform voluntarily or be forced to change. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Some species supported human proposals. They had been minor members who suffered under the current system. Others were outraged. They saw this as rebellion that must be crushed. A few remained silent and calculating. They were trying to figure out which side would win. The unity of 50,000 years was cracking. Elder Voth stood and spoke. The ancient Archon called for silence. His species had founded the Concordat long ago. They had watched it grow corrupt over millennia. He said humans were right. The system needed reform. The Archons would support humanity's proposal. They would help build a new Concordat based on justice instead of strength. Other species should join them or step aside. The Archon's support changed everything. 3 more species immediately joined the reform movement. 2 others declared neutrality. That left 6 species opposing humanity. They began forming their own alliance. The Concordat split into factions. Some historians later said this was when the old order truly died. The galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity faced difficult choices now. They had a massive fleet but limited resources. Maintaining it was expensive. Building it had required total sacrifice from every human. They could not live that way forever. They needed to find a balance between security and normal life, between military strength and civilian needs, between protecting themselves and becoming the next Concordat. Admiral Chen Wei stood on a space station orbiting Earth. She looked down at her homeworld through the observation window. The planet was beautiful. Blue oceans and green continents. White clouds drifting peacefully. It looked so fragile from up here. So easy to destroy. 3 missiles had almost ended everything humanity had ever built. She would never forget that, but humanity had survived. They had faced the oldest and strongest empire in the galaxy and won. They had proven that determination and unity could overcome superior technology. They had changed the galaxy forever just by refusing to die. Now came the harder part. Building peace was always more difficult than fighting war. Chen smiled slightly. If humans could build 47,000 warships in 3 years, they could probably figure out peace too. They just needed to work together, like they always did when their existence depended on it.